So an atheist was walking through the woods. How beautiful the birds singing, he says. How majestic the trees. How powerful the rivers. And as he's enjoying his time out in nature, he hears a rustling in the bushes in back of him. And he turns and he sees a 7-foot grizzly bear charging right towards him. So he takes off running down the path. He turns around to look, and the grizzly bear is catching up with him. Runs a little bit faster, a little bit harder. He turns around. The grizzly bear is even closer. He turns back around. He trips and he falls. And just as he's rolling over to pick himself up, he looks up and the bear is right over him. He looks up and he sees the bear is reaching down with the left paw to take hold of him, and the right paw is poised to strike him. And the man says, "Oh my God!" Time stopped. The forest grew silent. The bear was frozen. A light shined on the man, and a voice from the sky said, "You deny me all these years and teach others that I don't exist? Do you really expect me to get you out of this predicament now? Am I to count you as one of the believers?" The man looks right up into the light and he says, "Well, it would be hypocritical of me to ask you to treat me as one of the believers now, but perhaps you could make the bear a believer." The voice said, "Very well." The light went out. The sounds of the forest resumed. The bear dropped his right paw, brought his paws together, bowed his head, and said, "Dear God, thank you for this food I am about to eat. May it nourish my body." Oh, well, maybe you've had the experience of time standing still in your life. I know I've had that experience several times. And I've noticed that it covered a wide variety of emotions and experiences when I've had that. Sometimes I know I've had it when I was feeling kind of sad and grieving, and I've had the experience of time standing still when I was happy and blissful. So surely you've had the experience of time being too short. Just couldn't find enough time. Maybe you were in some creative process or project and sun's going down. It's time to put the watercolors away. Where did the day go? Or maybe spending time with your grandchildren and it's time for them to go home. You say, "Wow, you just got here." Or trying to find time to be with your sweetheart. Just not enough time in the day. Can't find that time. And then you've probably had the experience of the opposite, when it just seemed like time went on forever, just drug on forever. And when is this speaker going to get to the point of her talk? I'm getting there. Well, this morning I want to talk to you about time, and I want to talk to you about prayer. My talk is entitled "The Nowness of Prayer." A few weeks ago, I shared with you about the oneness of prayer. And we talked about the radical way of praying that Jesus presented to the world. Unfortunately, it quickly fell back into the well-established, customary way of praying that had gone on for many centuries and is still going on today. But what Jesus presented was very radical, a new way of praying. It started with, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." And in that, you can see that it's a new way of praying because of three things. First of all, Jesus was talking to God as a father, not father of creation or father of the nation, but as you would talk to your daddy. Secondly, this Father is in heaven. And we know, according to Jesus' own teachings, that heaven is within each and every one of us. And the name of this living, loving, supportive presence is I Am. So I hope you took that into your contemplation time, considering that prayer in the way that Jesus intended it. Not the way that it fits into any religion or any theology or any philosophy, but the way it fits in to all of Jesus' teachings. And in that way, I think you'll begin to understand more fully. Well, first of all, you'll understand why his teachings were so troublesome to the religious authorities. But I think you'll begin to understand your oneness with God more fully. And in fact, a prayer or a meditation that would help you to understand your oneness with God would be to simply sit in the silence and to affirm, I am. I am. And as you become comfortable with that, you might want to go a little bit deeper and affirm, I and the Father are one. And as you do that, you begin to understand that the kingdom of heaven is indeed within you. So then you might want to affirm something like, may the kingdom of heaven come into expression in my life. And then as you sit in the silence and you commune with the infinite, then you begin to touch that sacred yes within you. So then you might want to affirm, may the sacred yes within me come into expression in my life and in my world. So then, as you begin to deepen your understanding of oneness, you begin to know that the will of God is always good. The will of God is always for your highest fulfillment. Then you might want to affirm something like, may the will of God come into expression in my truest dreams and my most authentic desires and goals, something like that. Well, today, I want to share with you about the nowness of prayer. You know, most of us grew up or were taught a very basic form of prayer. And if you get to thinking about it, it's a lot like letter writing. You remember letter writing, right? Anybody still writing letters? I can't remember the last time I wrote a letter. But if you look at it, they're very similar. When you write a letter, you start with dear. You have some kind of salutation in the same way traditional prayer, dear God, dear Heavenly Father, something like that. And then there's the body of the letter in which you write you state the reason why you're writing, or you make your case, or you make your request, or you state the situation, something like that. And then there's a flowery closing at the end. Well, writing a letter assumes that you're writing to someone who's not present, someone maybe even far, far away, like a loved one that's serving in the military in a foreign land, or someone who lives in Vancouver or something. And just as soon as you write the word dear, you know that you're involved in a process of waiting for a reply. This process, you begin by writing, dear so-and-so, you write your letter, fold it up, put it in an envelope, lick a stamp. Remember licking stamps? Doesn't that sound strange? Put it in the mailbox, and you wait for a reply. Maybe they'll respond, maybe they won't. And for many people, prayer is like that process of waiting for a reply. Maybe they'll respond. Maybe they didn't get it. Maybe I should try it again. Dear God, maybe you didn't hear me the first time. Let me tell you again, because the situation's still going on. But what Jesus presented was a way of communing with a living, loving presence that's always with you and within you. Always hearing, right here, right now. Always listening, right here, right now. Always responding. Always answering, right here, right now. In fact, Jesus said, the Father knows your needs before you even ask. How could that be? Because the Father is right here, right now. So understanding prayer in the way that Jesus understood it, you begin to realize there's really not a process in prayer. There's not a process of trying to contact a God out there somewhere, hoping to receive an answer to your prayer. If there's any process to prayer, it's with you. It's in bringing your consciousness into alignment with the divine creative flow. It's the process of bringing your being into the place of the innermost being. Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of bringing your consciousness into alignment with the divine flow, bringing your prayers into alignment with the innermost God. I know a girl, cute girl, and for many years she was just fine with being single, and she loved to go out and loved to go dancing, had a lot of friends and dating a lot and everything. She was fine with not being in a relationship, committed relationship, and she found herself involved with a guy that it was not a good relationship, and they didn't talk, they didn't communicate, and they'd come together on the weekend, and then he'd go his way and she'd go her way. It just wasn't good. But anyway, she was on her way to a wedding. Well, actually, she was on her way home from a wedding, so maybe that put it in her head to settle down or something. But she pulls off the interstate, she stops the car, and she prayed, and she said, "Okay, God, I'm ready. I'm open. I want a relationship. I want it to be balanced. I want this person to be sensitive. I want them to be creative and intelligent. I want it to be someone that I can communicate with and share and talk with. I want this person to be on the spiritual path, just like I'm on the spiritual path." That prayer was heard right then. That prayer was responded to right then. That prayer was answered instantly. That prayer didn't manifest until about 10 years later. You see, she wanted a relationship that was balanced, but she really wasn't too in balance herself. She wanted a relationship that she could communicate and talk with someone, but she really didn't know about communication skills and relationship skills. And she wanted somebody that was on a spiritual path like she was. Well, she had just started on her spiritual path. You see all the things that had to line up in order for that relationship to come into being? Who would have thought all the working of the universe that would have to take place in order for that prayer to be answered? Who would have thought that she would have fixed up an old school bus and driven it from Nashville, Tennessee to the Pacific Coast and then on up to Vancouver, and somehow ended up in Yuma, Arizona, where she walked into Java Oasis Espresso Bar and met the love of her life over 13 years ago? Who would have thought all of that would have to come into place? Now, you might say, well, 10 years, I don't want to wait 10 years for my prayer to be answered. I'm not saying that it takes 10 years for your prayer to be answered. I am saying that it's worth it. You might say, that's not my idea of prayer. My idea of prayer is, I say what I want, and I want it now. Let me ask you. The Father in heaven is within, right? So that means that the answer to your prayer must come from within your own being. Something to contemplate this week. God is not limited by time. God is not in the past. God is not in the future, and actually God isn't even in the present, because God isn't really subject to this concept that we call time. We could say that God is in the eternal now. So where do you have to be in order to be where God is? Where does your consciousness need to be in order to line up with that eternal presence in the eternal now? I'm not laughing at us, but how often are you in the eternal now? I mean, think about your day. How often are you in the past? I know, wow. Thinking about what you did yesterday or didn't do yesterday, or how come that person hasn't called me back, or why didn't they respond to my email? That's the past. And how often are you in the future? Wonder what we should have for dinner. That's the future. I should go to Sam's Club, get some salad for dinner. That's the future. But prayer is a connection. Prayer is communion with the eternal presence in the eternal now. And what I want to submit to you this morning is that this next part of the Lord's Prayer talks about preparing our consciousness for being in this eternal now. Because before God's healing presence can be experienced, before the union with the infinite can be felt, we have to be in that place of alignment with the divine creative flow. That place, as if our consciousness has to be prepared to enter the kingdom of heaven. So what I want to submit to you is that this next part of the Lord's Prayer talks about that preparation of consciousness and being in the eternal now. It says, "Give us this day our daily bread." That's the present. "And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors." That's the past. "And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." That's the future. Wow, we could spend a whole afternoon workshop on that one. Some people, when they hear, "Give us this day our daily bread," they think that that's talking about putting food on the table to nourish our physical bodies. Jesus wasn't concerned with that. No, remember he talked about bread of life? He said the true bread that the Father gives you comes out of heaven. That's worth meditating on right there. So when he said daily bread, we could think of it as words of truth, or wisdom and understanding, or something that gives sustenance to our bodies, minds, and spirits. How about something that satisfies us emotionally, mentally, and physically? So when he said, "Give us this day our daily bread," it was as if he said, help us to stay in the present moment. Help us to stay in the eternal now. And then he went on to say, and help us to untangle the knots in our minds and our hearts that keep us bound to the past. And we know that forgiveness helps to set us free from the past. And then he went on to say, and help us not get lost in material things and superficial things, escaping into false appearances. Help us be free of everything that keeps us from our true connection. And understanding prayer in this way, your entire life becomes a prayer. Every thought is a prayer. You're a living, walking, breathing prayer. Your life becomes a continual communion with the innermost God. And it begins to express as healing and harmony and continuous good. So do you believe in prayer? Do you believe that the Father is right here, right now, hearing you, listening, responding to you, answering your prayers? And are you ready to step into that divine flow? Are you ready to bring your consciousness into alignment with the innermost God of your being? I hope you are. I love you all. Namaste. Thank you. All right.